The beam fell at 0917, and everything after that happened in the kind of silence that only comes when a ship is dying. Lieutenant Nate Calloway heard it before he saw it. A groan of metal so deep it vibrated in his molars. Then the ceiling of Corridor 7 buckled inward like a fist pressing through wet paper, and Ensign Lily Vasquez disappeared beneath 300 pounds of structural titanium. Nate hit the floor on instinct. Dust filled the air. Sparks showered from a severed conduit above. Through the haze, he could see her legs. One boot still on, the other torn away. She was pinned from the waist up, her right arm trapped completely beneath the collapsed frame. He scrambled to her side. The emergency lights had switched to red, painting everything in the color of a wound. The ship, the Windfall, had taken a direct hit from a Dominion lance beam 40 seconds ago, and half the port side was venting atmosphere into space. Somewhere behind him, a sealed bulkhead groaned against the vacuum pulling at its edges. Lily's eyes were open. That was the first thing that told him she was still alive. They were wide and locked on his face with the sort of focus that people get when their body is screaming, but their brain has decided not to listen yet. Nate. Her voice was flat, controlled, the voice of someone holding every piece of themselves together with both hands. I can't feel my arm. He looked at where her arm disappeared under the beam. The titanium had come down at an angle, crushing the limb between itself and the deck plating beneath. There was no blood visible, which meant the pressure was acting as its own tourniquet. And if he lifted the beam, she would bleed out in minutes. Okay, he said. Okay. I'm going to get you out. He tried his communicator. Dead. He tried the wall panel. Sparks and nothing. The corridor was sealed on both ends. Bulkhead doors had locked automatically when the hull breach occurred 2 sections over. They were boxed in. He ran to the emergency kit mounted near the sealed door. Inside, he found a plasma cutter, a basic medkit, a tube of BioSeal, and 2 doses of combat analgesic. No bone regenerator, no auto-suture unit, nothing that could reattach or repair what lay crushed beneath that beam. His mind did the math before he was ready for it. He pushed the answer away, came back to her side. Damage control channel is dead, he said. Bulkheads are sealed. I don't know how long until someone reaches us. How long do we have? She asked. Not how long until rescue. How long until the corridor lost atmosphere. He checked the gauge on the wall. The needle was dropping, slow but dropping. A microfracture somewhere in the hull was leaking their air into the void. Maybe 40 minutes, he said. And the beam? I can't lift it, not even close. She was quiet for a moment. Her breathing stayed even. On the other side of the sealed bulkhead, something detonated, and the floor shuddered. The lights flickered. In that half-second of darkness, Nate felt the full weight of what was coming settle onto his shoulders like something physical. You have the plasma cutter, Lily said. He didn't answer. Nate, you have the plasma cutter. I know what I have. Then you know what you have to do. He knelt beside her. The red light made her face look like a painting of someone much older. She was 26, 2 years younger than him. She had transferred to the Windfall 4 months ago from a research station near Callisto. And on her first day, she had beaten him at chess in 11 moves, and then apologized for it. She was the kind of person who apologized for winning. I'm not doing that, he said. You're a field medic. I'm a structural engineer who took a field medic course 6 years ago. Close enough. Lily, look at the arm, Nate. He looked. He already knew. The limb was destroyed. Even if they could lift the beam, even if a full surgical team was standing right there, the arm was gone, crushed beyond anything biology or technology could reassemble. The only question was whether the rest of her went with it. "I can feel the cold," she said. "From the leak. Can you feel it?" He could. The temperature was dropping. His breath was just starting to show. "You do this, and we both walk out," she said. "You don't do this, and neither of us does." He opened the medkit. His hands were steady, which surprised him. He had expected them to shake. He loaded the first dose of combat analgesic into the injector and pressed it to her neck. She flinched at the hiss, then relaxed. "That's going to take the edge off," he said. "Not all of it." "I know." He powered on the plasma cutter. The blue-white light of the blade reflected off the walls, turning the red corridor into something almost purple. He adjusted the beam width to its narrowest setting. Surgical almost, not quite. "I need you to stay still," he said. "Completely still." "I know. And I need you to tell me if you're going to pass out. Because if you do, I need to be ready for it." "I'm not going to pass out." He believed her. Lily Vasquez had a spine made of something harder than the titanium pinning her down. He had watched her sit through a briefing with a broken collarbone once, never saying a word about it until someone noticed her wincing, reaching for a coffee cup. She didn't do weakness where anyone could see it. He positioned the cutter 4 inches above her shoulder joint, right at the line where crushed met whole. He could see the boundary clearly. It was not a kind sight. "Ready?" he asked. She reached out with her left hand, on the one that still worked, and grabbed his forearm. Not to stop him, just to hold on. "Go," she said. He went. The sound was the worst part. Not the plasma cutting through bone, though that was a sound that would live in him for a long time. The worst part was the silence from Lily. She didn't scream. She didn't cry out. She gripped his forearm so hard that her fingernails broke the skin through his uniform sleeve, and she locked her jaw tight enough that he could hear her teeth creak. But she did not make a sound. He worked as fast as he dared. The plasma cutter was designed for hull plating, not flesh. It cauterized as it cut, which was the only reason she wasn't bleeding out. But the precision was crude, and every millimeter required his total concentration. He couldn't think about what he was doing. He could only think about straight lines and angles and the next half-inch of progress. 40 seconds. That was how long it took. 40 seconds that stretched out into something that felt like hours and compressed into something that felt like nothing at all. And when it was over, Lily Vasquez was free, and her right arm was still under the beam. He applied the bio-seal immediately. The thick gel compound covered the wound, hardening on contact, forming a temporary barrier against infection and further blood loss. She was pale. Too pale. Her grip on his forearm had loosened, but not let go. "Lily, talk to me." "Still here," she whispered. He administered the second dose of analgesic. Her breathing was shallow now, and her eyes had that glassy, far-away look that told him shock was moving in fast. He stripped off his jacket and wrapped it around her, pulling her against his chest to conserve body heat. The temperature was still dropping. Their breath hung in the air like small ghosts. "I need you to stay awake," he said. "Tell me something." "What?" "Anything. Keep talking." He talked. He told her about his mother's house in Vermont, the one with the crooked porch that his father never fixed because he said the crookedness gave it character. He told her about the dog he had growing up, a mutt named Dodger, who ate a whole Thanksgiving turkey once and didn't even have the grace to look sorry about it. He told her about the first time he saw Earth from orbit, how he had expected to feel small, but instead felt angry because it looked so fragile, and nobody down there seemed to understand what they had. She listened. Her hand stayed on his arm. The grip would tighten when a wave of pain broke through the analgesic, then ease, then tighten again. Each squeeze was a signal. Still here, still here, still here. He ran out of stories, so he started making them up. Told her about a planet made entirely of glass, where the oceans reflected every star in the sky at once, so the whole surface looked like a living mirror. Told her about an alien species that communicated only through cooking, where the spice level of a dish determined how passionate the conversation was, and a really heated argument smelled like a 5-alarm curry. She laughed at that one, a small broken sound that was the best thing he had heard all day. The temperature hit 4 degrees Celsius. Their breath wasn't just showing now, it was hanging in the air, thick and visible, drifting in slow clouds between them. Nate's fingers were going numb. Lily was shaking, a fine tremor that ran through her whole body despite his jacket and his arms around her. "How long?" she asked. He checked the atmospheric gauge again. The needle had dropped further. 20 minutes, maybe 15. And rescue? I don't know. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Tell me about the glass planet again." He did. He added details. Cities built on stilts above the mirror ocean, with bridges made of woven light. People who navigated by looking down instead of up, because the stars beneath their feet were more reliable than the ones overhead. A festival where they shattered one pane of ocean glass each year and let the real water underneath touch the air. And the sound it made was supposed to be the most beautiful thing in the known universe. "You should write that down," she said, "when we get out of here. When we get out of here, I'm sleeping for a week. Write it down first, then sleep." 14 minutes later, the bulkhead door screeched open. Chief Petty Officer Dan Harmon and a damage control team pushed through with cutting equipment and a stretcher. Dan's face went white when he saw the scene. Nate watched him take in the beam, the arm beneath it, the woman wrapped in Nate's jacket with a cauterized wound where her shoulder ended. "She's stable," Nate said. "For now. She needs surgery. Real surgery." They got her on the stretcher. As they lifted her, her left hand reached out and found Nate's. She squeezed once. Hard. "Thank you," she said, and then the analgesic finally won, and her eyes closed, and they carried her away down the corridor, boots ringing on metal, and Nate stood alone in the cold. His arm had 5 half-moon cuts from her fingernails. He stared at the beam, at what lay beneath it, and he didn't move until the corridor temperature hit 0, and someone came back to pull him out. The Windfall limped into port at Armstrong Station 3 days later. Nate spent most of those 3 days in the engine bay, helping hold together a ship that wanted very badly to fall apart. The Dominion Lance had carved through 4 decks and compromised the primary power conduit. Every system was running on backup. Half the crew was working double shifts. Nobody slept more than a few hours. The mess hall ran out of real coffee on day 2 and switched to the synthetic stuff that tasted like someone had described coffee to a machine, and the machine had done its honest best. He didn't visit the medical bay. He told himself it was because he was needed on repair duty. He told himself it was because she was in surgery, then in recovery, and visitors would just be in the way. He told himself a lot of things that were mostly true and entirely beside the point. On the second day, Dan Harmon found him rerouting a coolant line in Section 12 and sat on an overturned crate until Nate couldn't pretend he wasn't there anymore. "She's awake," Dan said. "Good. She's asking for you." Nate tightened a coupling joint with more force than it needed. "I'll come by when I'm done here," You've been done here for 20 minutes. You're rechecking work you already checked. Maybe I'm thorough. Dan let the silence do the heavy lifting. He was good at that. 10 years older than Nate, career Navy. The kind of man who had seen enough to know when someone was running from something and patient enough to wait at the finish line. What you did was the right call, Dan said. I cut off her arm. You saved her life. Those two things can both be true, and neither of them makes it easier. Dan nodded. He didn't argue. He didn't offer comfort or perspective or any of the things people say when they want to help and don't know how. He just stood up, clapped Nate on the shoulder, and walked away. Nate visited the medical bay that evening. He stood outside the door for 4 minutes before going in, which he knew because he counted every second. When the medical bay was running at triple capacity, every bed was full. The ship's surgeon, Dr. Amy Okoro, was operating on a mix of stim patches and willpower, her eyes ringed with the kind of exhaustion that doesn't go away with one good night's rest. Lily was in bed 7. Her right side was bandaged from neck to waist. A neural interface cap sat on her head, mapping her nervous system for the prosthetic fitting that would happen once they reached proper facilities. She looked small in the bed, smaller than someone with her personality should ever look. Hey, she said when she saw him. Her voice was rough but steady. Hey, sit down. You look worse than I do. He sat. He couldn't figure out what to do with his hands, so he put them on his knees and stared at them. So, she said, that happened. Yeah. You're doing that thing where you don't talk because you think if you start, you'll say something you can't take back. He looked up. She was watching him with eyes that were too sharp for someone running on hospital-grade painkillers. I keep thinking about the sound, he said. Don't. It's not something I can just turn off. No, she agreed. But it's something you can decide not to feed. The sound is going to be there. The memory is going to be there. But you don't have to keep replaying it like it's the only thing that happened in that corridor. What else happened? You talked to me about a dog named Dodger. You held me up when I was going into shock. You kept your hand steady when everything inside you was falling apart. You made up a planet made of glass to keep me from closing my eyes. And that's also what happened in that corridor. He was quiet for a while. The medical bay hummed with the sound of machines keeping people alive. In the bed next to Lily, someone coughed in their sleep and rolled over and went still again. The arm, he said. The prosthetic. They said it could be a full neural link model. Better than the original in some ways. I heard. Apparently I'll be able to crush a beer can with my pinky. Important skill. Essential. A small silence. The kind that isn't empty but full of things neither person has figured out how to say yet. I'll be there, he said. For the fitting, for the rehab, whatever you need. I know you will. How do you know that? Because you stayed in the corridor. You could have tried to find another way out. You could have focused on saving yourself. You stayed. There was no other way out. There's always another way out, Nate. You just didn't look for one. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. She was right, and they both knew it. The sealed bulkheads had micro-access panels. He could have cut through one, maybe. Could have tried to find another route to safety. Instead, he had stayed with her in a corridor that was slowly losing air and getting colder by the minute. Because leaving hadn't occurred to him. Not because he was brave. Because it simply hadn't been a possibility his brain was willing to generate. She reached out with her left hand. He took it. The half-moon cuts on his forearm had scabbed over, and her fingers brushed against them as she gripped his hand. We're going to be okay, she said. And he wasn't sure if she meant the two of them or something bigger, he decided it didn't matter. "Yeah," he said. "We are." Armstrong Station was the largest orbital facility in the Sol system, a spinning wheel of steel and light that housed 60,000 people and served as the primary repair dock for the United Earth Fleet. The windfall was directed to Berth 9, and within an hour of docking, the station's repair crews swarmed over the ship like ants discovering a dropped sandwich. Nate filed his incident report on the first day. He kept it factual. Timeline, actions taken, medical decisions made. He did not include the sound, or the way Lily's fingernails had broken his skin, or the 4 minutes he spent outside the medical bay door. Those things belonged to a different kind of record. On the third day at Armstrong, he received a summons to the office of Captain Marcus Powell, commanding officer of the Windfall. Nate had served under Powell for 2 years and still couldn't entirely read the man. Powell was tall and quiet and had a face that seemed designed for weather it hadn't experienced yet, all sharp edges and patient eyes. He led by expectation. He never raised his voice. He didn't need to. "Lieutenant Calloway," Powell said when Nate entered. "Sit." Nate sat. The captain's office had a viewport that looked out onto the repair bay, and through it he could see the Windfall's wounded hull being cut away and replaced, piece by piece. Workers moved along scaffolding like bright orange insects, their welding torches throwing brief blue light against the station's interior. "I've read your incident report," Powell said. "Yes, sir." "It's very thorough." "Thank you, sir." "It's also the most restrained piece of writing I've read in 20 years of service. You describe a field amputation with a plasma cutter in the same tone you might use to describe a coolant valve replacement." Nate said nothing. "I'm not criticizing you," Powell continued. "I'm observing that you have a particular talent for compartmentalizing, and I want to make sure the talent is serving you and not the other way around." "I'm fine, sir." "I didn't ask if you were fine. Nobody who does what you did is fine 3 days later. If they are, that's a different kind of problem." Powell leaned back. "I'm assigning you to support Ensign Vasquez through her prosthetic integration process. It's a 6-week program. During that time, you're off active repair rotation." "Sir, the ship needs every engineer." "The ship needs engineers who sleep more than 3 hours a night and eat something other than ration bars. And your crewmate needs someone in her corner who understands what happened in that corridor. You're both going through the same thing from different ends." Nate wanted to argue. He wanted to say that keeping busy was how he processed things, that stopping would be worse, that if he sat still long enough, the sound would come back. But Powell had the kind of authority that didn't come from rank. It came from being right. "Yes, sir," Nate said. He left the captain's office and went to the station's observation deck. He stood at the window and watched the Windfall being rebuilt. New hull plating was being welded into place over the scars the Dominion Lance had left. In a few weeks, and the ship would look like nothing had ever happened. The metal wouldn't remember. The people inside it would. He found Lily in the rehabilitation wing the next morning. She was already in a session with the prosthetic integration specialist, a compact woman named Dr. Rita Fernandez, who spoke with the calm precision of someone who had rebuilt a lot of broken people and knew that the rebuilding never went in a straight line. The prosthetic arm was a piece of engineering that made Nate's technical side sit up and pay attention despite everything else. It was a neural link model, meaning it connected directly to Lily's nervous system through a series of microfilament interfaces implanted at the amputation site. The arm would feel. Not like the original, not exactly, but it would register pressure, temperature, and texture. Because it would know when it was holding something too hard and when it wasn't holding hard enough. The challenge was calibration. The brain had to learn to talk to the new limb, and the new limb had to learn to listen. It was a conversation that happened at the speed of nerve impulses, millions of signals per second. And getting it wrong meant everything from dropped cups to crushed doorframes. "You're staring," Lily said on his first day in the rehab wing. "I'm observing." "You're staring at the arm like it personally offended you." "It's a fascinating piece of engineering." "It's my arm." "Don't call it fascinating. Call it average at best. Give it something to work toward." He laughed. It was the first time he had laughed since the corridor, and the sound surprised him so much that he stopped mid-breath. Lily noticed. She filed it away behind those sharp eyes and said nothing about it. Dr. Fernandez ran Lily through a series of exercises. Close the hand, open the hand, pick up the ball, set it down. Each movement required concentration that turned Lily's face into a mask of effort. The neural link was raw. Every signal was too strong or too weak, and the arm responded in jerks and lurches that bore no resemblance to the fluid motion it would eventually achieve. "It's like trying to write with your non-dominant hand while someone screams numbers at you," Lily said during a break, oddly specific. "I'm an oddly specific person." She dropped the ball 11 times that first session, crushed one so completely that the foam innards squirted between her fingers like something alive making a break for it, or sent another rolling across the room with a spasm she didn't intend. After 90 minutes, Dr. Fernandez called it, and Lily sat in her chair with sweat on her forehead and frustration written across her face in a language Nate was beginning to learn to read. "Day 1, he said. "Day 1, she repeated. "You'll get it." "I know I'll get it. That's not the part that bothers me." "What bothers you?" She flexed the prosthetic hand. The fingers moved, imperfectly, each one a fraction of a second behind her intention. "It bothers me that the hand that held on to you in that corridor is the one that's gone. This one can do things the old one never could. Stronger, more precise, better in every measurable way. But it wasn't there." Nate sat down across from her. "I've got the scars to prove the other one was." She looked at his forearm. The half-moon marks were fading but still visible. 5 small crescents in a row, like a constellation no one had named yet. "Don't let those heal," she said. Then she smiled in a way that was mostly humor and partly something else entirely. And they sat there in the quiet of the rehabilitation wing while Armstrong's station turned slowly in the dark. The weeks that followed developed a rhythm that neither of them acknowledged out loud, as if naming it might break whatever made it work. Every morning, Nate arrived at the rehabilitation wing at 0700. Every morning, Lily was already there, working through pre-session exercises with the quiet intensity of someone who had decided that this arm was going to cooperate whether it wanted to or not. The progress was incremental but real. By the end of the first week, she could hold a cup without breaking it. By the end of the second, she could write her name, though the letters looked like they belonged to a different person, someone younger and less certain. By the third week, she caught a ball Dr. Fernandez tossed at her without warning, snatching it from the air with a reflexive snap that surprised all 3 of them. The look on Lily's face was worth every hour of the previous 20 days. Nate found himself doing something he hadn't expected. He was learning. Not the engineering of the prosthetic, though he absorbed that too. Filing away every detail of the neural link interface for later study because his brain collected mechanical knowledge the way some people collected stamps. He was learning how Lily processed things. She didn't talk about the corridor directly. She talked around it, referencing it through the arm, through the rehabilitation, through small jokes that carried weight she pretended not to notice. "You know what the worst part is?" she said one afternoon while calibrating grip strength on a series of graduated cylinders. Tell me. I keep reaching for things with the wrong hand. Not the prosthetic, the old one, the ghost of it. My brain sends the signal, and for a half second, the old arm is still there, reaching for the coffee cup or the data pad or whatever. And then the signal arrives at the new one, and it's like getting a call forwarded. The message gets there, but the route is wrong. And by the time the new hand responds, the moment has already passed. Phantom limb response. It's normal. I know it's normal. I've read the literature. 14 studies, 2 meta-analyses. And I am extremely well informed about how normal this is. Being well informed does not make it less weird when your brain insists a part of you is still there and the mirror says otherwise. You read 14 studies? I had time. Someone cut off my arm and I was bedridden for a week. Low blow. I've earned a few. On the 4th week, something shifted. Dr. Fernandez introduced fine motor exercises. Threading a needle, typing on a standard keyboard, peeling a piece of fruit, folding a paper crane. These were the tasks that separated a functional prosthetic from a truly integrated one. And they required the kind of neural precision that only came from repetition, patience, and a willingness to fail dozens of times before succeeding once. Lily hated them. Not the difficulty, but the vulnerability. Fine motor work made the arm's limitations visible in a way that gross motor tasks did not. A hand that could grip a wrench and throw a punch could still tremble while holding a needle. The gap between what the arm could do and what a natural limb would do was narrowest during fine motor work. But it was also most visible. And Lily wore that gap like something she couldn't quite button up. Nate noticed that she stopped making jokes during fine motor sessions. The humor that carried her through everything else went quiet. And in its place was a silence that had edges to it. The kind of silence you could cut yourself on if you leaned too close. He didn't push. He didn't ask. He just stayed. He brought coffee to every session. He sat close enough that she could see him in her peripheral vision, and far enough away that she didn't feel watched. It was a distance he calibrated as carefully as Dr. Fernandez calibrated the arm. On a Tuesday afternoon, during a particularly frustrating session where the needle kept slipping from her prosthetic fingers and landing on the table with a tiny, accusatory click, Lily set the needle down, placed both hands flat on the surface, and stared at the wall across the room. There were 19 people on the casualty list from the Corridor 7 collapse, she said. Her voice was neutral. The kind of neutral that takes effort to maintain, like holding a heavy door open and making it look easy. I looked it up. 19 people affected by the same structural failure that pinned me. 3 of them didn't make it. One of them was Petty Officer Greg Salinas. He was 2 sections over from us. Same beam system, different angle. He didn't have anyone with him. Nate was quiet. I keep thinking about the math of it. Why I survived and he didn't. It wasn't anything I did. It wasn't anything about me that was better or more deserving. It was geometry. The beam fell at an angle that left my body intact and only took my arm. And 2 sections over, a different beam fell at a different angle and it took everything. 3 degrees of difference, maybe less. Lily, I'm not falling apart. I just need to say this out loud so it stops living only inside my head where it can redecorate the place however it wants. She picked up the needle, threaded it on the first try. The prosthetic fingers moved with a precision they hadn't shown all session, as if the hand had been waiting for the rest of her to catch up. She set the threaded needle down and looked at it. There, she said. Tell Dr. Fernandez I did it. He told Dr. Fernandez, He did not tell her about the rest of the conversation. Some things were not data points. Some things were just two people sitting in a room being honest with each other about the things that didn't fit neatly into progress reports. Week 5 brought integration testing. The prosthetic arm was subjected to a series of evaluations designed to measure how fully it had become part of Lily's body, not just mechanically, but neurologically. Reaction time tests, sensory discrimination exercises, stress response monitoring where they measured how the arm behaved when Lily was startled, angry, or afraid, off because a truly integrated prosthetic doesn't just obey commands. It reacts. The results came back strong across the board. Better than projected, Dr. Fernandez said, reviewing the data on her tablet. Your neural adaptation rate is in the top 3%. The arm is talking to your brain like it's been there for years, not weeks. I'm a fast learner, Lily said. You're a stubborn learner. There's a difference, and in this case, it's the better quality to have. That evening, Nate found Lily on the observation deck. She was standing at the viewport, her prosthetic hand pressed flat against the glass. The lights of Armstrong Station's exterior docking ring reflected off the new arm, turning the matte gray surface into something almost luminous. Can you feel it? He asked, coming to stand beside her. The glass. Cold, she said. Smooth. A vibration underneath from the station's rotation. And something else. I think it's the heat differential from the other side. Vacuum on one side, pressurized air on the other. The arm can tell the difference. The old arm couldn't do that. The old arm couldn't do a lot of things. She pulled her hand away from the glass and flexed the fingers. Dr. Fernandez says I'm ahead of schedule. She wants to clear me for active duty by the end of week 6. That's good. Is it? He looked at her. You don't want to go back? I want to go back more than anything. That's what scares me. I should be afraid. I should be hesitant. I watched a beam come through a ceiling and take my arm. And what I feel when I think about going back to the windfall is not fear. It's impatience. Maybe that's what courage looks like from the inside. Not the absence of fear. Just the inability to sit still. She laughed. That's either very wise or very dumb, and I can't tell which. It's probably both. They stood at the viewport together. Outside, a transport shuttle drifted past on approach to the docking ring, its running lights blinking in a slow, patient rhythm. Beyond it, the stars did what stars always do, which is burn without caring who is watching. On the last day of the 6th week, Lily completed her final evaluation. She passed every benchmark. The arm was hers now, not a replacement, but an extension, wired into her nervous system deep enough that the boundary between original and engineered had blurred into something she no longer thought about. When she reached for a cup, she didn't think about which hand to use. When she caught something thrown at her, the prosthetic moved with the same unconscious speed as the natural limb. The conversation between brain and arm had become fluent. Dr. Fernandez signed the clearance form and shook Lily's hand. The prosthetic one. She held the grip for a moment longer than necessary, testing, and then nodded. Good pressure, she said. Consistent, natural. You're ready. Nate walked Lily out of the rehabilitation wing. The corridor of Armstrong Station was busy with personnel moving between shifts. The ordinary traffic of a working station that had no idea what had happened in this small corner of it over the past 6 weeks. People passed them carrying toolkits and data pads and cups of coffee, living inside their own stories, unaware of the one that had just ended in the room behind them. So, he said. So, you're cleared for active duty. I am. How does that feel? She flexed the prosthetic hand, The movement was fluid now, effortless, indistinguishable from the natural motion of her left hand. She reached out and took his hand. The prosthetic fingers were warm. The pressure was precise. He could feel each finger individually, and in the contact, there was something that the original hand had never had the chance to say. "It feels like I owe you a chess game," she said. "You'll win." Obviously, but that's not the point. The point is playing. They walked toward the station's main concourse. Behind them, the rehabilitation wing processed its next patient. In the repair bay visible through every third viewport, the windfall gleamed under new hull plating, ready to fly again. Her scars were covered but not forgotten, written into the maintenance logs and the structural integrity reports and the memories of every person who had been aboard when the lance beam hit. Somewhere in the stars beyond the station, the Dominion was still out there, and the war was still being fought, and the universe was still the kind of place where beams fell, and corridors got cold, and people did terrible, necessary things to keep each other alive. But in this moment, in this corridor on a spinning station in orbit around nothing in particular, a woman held a man's hand with fingers that didn't exist 6 weeks ago. And the grip was perfect. Not too tight, not too loose. The exact pressure of someone saying "I'm here" without needing to use words. Outside the viewport, Earth turned blue and quiet in the distance. The kind of beautiful that makes people travel a long way from home and then spend the whole time wanting to go back. The kind worth holding on to, even when the holding hurts. They didn't talk about what came next. They didn't need to. The windfall would launch again. They would both be on it. The stars would still be burning. The war would still be waiting. And when the next beam fell, because beams always fall, they would do what they had already proven they could do. They would stay.